Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today, folks. My name is Madhav, and I'm going to be your host for today. Today's session is on generative AI productivity workflows. We are going to look at what that actually means. It is in relation to how we use recent tools like ChatGPT, Claude, all of these different tools for our own productivity. So we are going to look at like some interesting techniques that sort of help you get better output and better effective results from them. Um, when we start, just a little bit about ourselves. So this session is part of the meetup group called Skill and Skill. It is run by Curious Skill. We are a Canadian skill training organization. My co-host Avneet is also here. And so both of us are going to be facilitating the session, and sort of like the purpose of these sessions is to have a weekly spot to learn about AI, to sort of pick up on interesting topics that people might be interested in, and to sort of create an interactive space for everybody to learn from each other. So that's a little bit about what this group is. Now, before I actually go on to like actual part of the session, I do want to sort of reiterate this, folks, that it's important for us to make this a safe space to learn. That's very important because again, like I understand, like we all are stressed. There's there's a lot going on, but it's important for us to create like a kind, patient, and good learning space. So this is just a reminder for everyone. Let's keep our conversation civil, nice. Let's focus on learning. Let's create a healthy learning environment. If there are times when there are individuals who are, let's say, not following the code of conduct, we will be reporting them and sort of removing them from the meeting. So let's just make sure, folks, that we create a safe space to learn for each other and actually just have like a good interactive fun session on an interesting topic that maybe matters to all of us. Okay, that's my spiel. Let's do a quick round of introductions. I'll again introduce myself. My name is Madhav. My co-host Avneet is also here. We are co-founders of Curious Skin. We run this session uh, as a part of our weekly AI learning community to sort of bring up interesting AI topics. Now, I'm going to request folks, if they can, introduce yourself, folks, on Zoom chat. Tell us your name, tell us what you do, and also maybe tell us what is the one thing that you want to take away from today. I'm going to maybe give it 1 minute, and I'm going to give people time to just quickly introduce yourself. And if you don't want to, that's also okay. But it's great to sort of like start to have like an interactive session. So I'm going to give people a minute to just quickly introduce themselves on Zoom chat. Hey, Roman. Hey, Ronald. Nice to meet you from New Jersey. Hey, Chelsea. I'm from Canada. Oh, nice. This is super cool. Plan one not 12 right today. I know we are going to look at 12 broad concepts today. So hopefully they'll be useful. Hey, Harry. Hey, Sabine. Nice. Thanks, folks. Thanks for starting to introduce yourself. Uh, I'm gonna like maybe give it 30 more seconds. Thanks, Lauren. Nice. We have a good round of introductions going. This is super cool, folks. Um, okay, nice. Awesome, folks. I'm seeing a lot of like, I'm seeing a lot of folks here. Okay, nice. Now, here, I'm going to you can keep going, you can keep introducing yourself, but I'll start diving into the session because we have a lot of things to sort of cover. Okay, so in today's session, now, let's take a step back of what we are going to be talking about. Um, we know that we have a lot of tools that are available to us from a generative AI perspective. We have ChatGPT, we have Claude, we have Gemini. We have a lot of those tools that are available to us now. A lot of times, a lot of times those tools are actually like there are a lot of suggestions on how to use those tools, and a lot of them are related to prompt engineering and context engineering and how you can write your prompt better and how you can do a lot of those things better. In today's session, I want to take like a step away from that because there's a lot of advice already there on how do you write your prompts better. But in today's session, we're going to focus on like broad high level workflows that you can apply so that you can make sure that your eventual output of your interaction with the generative AI tool is actually good. Now, you can use these things when you are actually working directly with something like ChatGPT. You can also use this thing if you are a programmer, if you are trying to build like a generative AI pipeline. Okay. So let me just take a look at quick chat. Yes, James, I will be sharing a recording of this later. We will have a recording. One second. If you're not able to see the presentation, folks, maybe you might need to rejoin because that will help. Okay. So there are four groups of things that we are going to be doing today. We are going to look at the concept of review loops. We are going to look at the concept of structuring your work. We are going to look at the work of the concept of multiple perspectives, and we are going to look at the concept of staying grounded. So these are the four ways of how I sort of categorize ways that you can make your workflows with ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, whatever you're using, better. So we are going to look at techniques in all four of these groups. And again, I will do some hands-on, I will do some actual examples. I will say, folks, if you have any questions, keep asking on Zoom chat. We'll also have time when I'm going to ask you folks to raise your hand and ask questions by unmuting yourself. So we'll also get to that. Okay, so assuming people are settled in, let's get going. Okay. So the first concept that I want to talk about is the concept of a review loops. Now, what does that essentially mean? That means that let's say you were slogging with your generative AI session, you were doing something with ChatGPT for a while, and now you have reached a final outcome where you wanted it to be. How do you actually review the work that has already been given to you, and how do you actually how do you double check that the output that ChatGPT is giving you is actually of good quality? So that's the broad concept of a review loop, where once you have sort of done some work with a session with ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or any of the large language generative models, how do you actually review that work? Okay. The first sort of a technique, which again, folks, some of these techniques might be obvious to you. You might already be doing it. I would love to hear how you guys are doing it. But some of these techniques are obvious, but it's important to still call it down. I also see a couple of things. Where will the recording be shared? Actually, the recording would be shared on Meetup. I'll send a link at the end of the session. It will help you also share for each of the category workflow how to judge a model as good enough model so that the cost is lowest and we are not overspending. I'll try and do my best in explaining those things, Sally, but we'll see a lot of this is very context dependent, but we'll see where that actually goes. Okay. So the first sort of a technique to sort of keep in mind is this concept known as fresh eyes review, which basically what it does is, and it's the simplest thing that you can do, and I'll show you what that necessarily means. Let's say I'm going to go to Gemini, and let's say on Gemini I am doing something. Let's say I said, okay, let's say I asked it, tell me more about tomatoes. And I'm going to use some dumb example, folks, just to keep it simple. But let's say, I hope that the examples are clean enough. Let's say I go to Gemini and I'm like, oh, okay, I want to know more about tomatoes. And then what it's going to do is it is going to start to give me some details. Let's say I read through these details. I'm like, okay, these sort of look good. And let's say I write, give me a one pager on how to sell tomatoes in Canada. That's where I am. I'm just using that as a dumb example. Now, the large language model, what it's going to do, it's going to try to condense the context that it has. So it already has this extra context, and then it will give me a broad summary of okay. This is the broad one pager that you can sort of use to how to say sell tomatoes in Canada. Now, When we are talking about this first technique of fresh eye reviews, obviously when you are reading this, it's important for you as a human to read this, to verify it and all of that. But one very dumb and simple thing that you can do, and it's what I also call as a no context review, is copy this, start a new session with ChatGPT or with your or Gemini or whatever you are using. What that does is when you start a new session, it sort of starts the language model with no context, right? And then what you can do is you can paste the response of your previous session, and then you can be like, oh, review this response, critique it, and tell me how to improve it. Again, the prompt really doesn't matter, folks, because it's a pattern. What you are doing is you are sort of taking an output from one session and pasting it into a no context session, which doesn't have all the history. Now, when you do this, right, what's going to happen is the large language model, the session that you have opened with the large language model, it is starting from scratch now. It doesn't have all the context that you had added before. And so it's going to sort of look at it from a fresh set of eyes. Again, it's not literal eyes, it's not a human, but it's going to have the language model sort of look at it again, and then it will start to identify things maybe that was missed in your first session. Now, the reason why it's important, that's because when you are in the midst of a sort of a session with sort of generative AI, or whether you're using this or whether you're using ChatGPT, what can happen is that it can end up like it can also end up becoming biased to your conversations. So starting a new session, making it start from scratch, giving it your output, and then pasting it here and asking it to review, can then maybe identify things that was sort of missed in your initial part. Now, I'm going to pause only for a very short time. If people have any questions, they can ask me on Zoom chat. I'll give it maybe 30 seconds. If people have tried this, I would love to know how many times should it be re-reviewed? That's a good question, Shreya. Typically, I do like 3 times. That's my personal workflow. I take an output of one, I paste it into a new session, and then I'm like, oh, give me a review. And then I take the review and the output of first and give it to a new session, and then I make it like, okay, can you tell me, is this logically correct? So I do tend to do it 3 times, but that's just because that's my personal preference. It can really vary on your task. I would even say it's good to experiment to see like at what time do you actually like get a good response. It's also good to experiment it cross model. You can take the output of one model, let's say Gemini, and then paste it in ChatGPT. Then take the output of ChatGPT and then paste it on Claude if you have access to different tools. So that's another sort of a way where you can like even further increase the breadth of your fresh eye reviews. But the number of times it really depends on the task, but I typically tend to do it 3 times. Let me know, Shreya, if I answered your question or if you have a follow up. I'll wait for 15 more seconds if people have more questions. Wouldn't that use a lot of tokens? It does. I think like optimizing tokens is not something that I'm necessarily covering today, but you are not wrong. It does end up taking a lot of tokens. I guess the only thing that I can say is that I do think that the token costs are slowly gonna come down as like you're gonna get more of a competition in this space. But it can use a lot of tokens. There are ways that you can potentially prevent it. Like you can sort of go here. You can sort of go here and see. You can say that, oh, give me a really short summary. You can try tricks like that, and that might reduce your token count. But it is true that some of these techniques do consume a lot more tokens. There isn't necessarily an easy solution to that. How do you handle large content? That's a great question. We are going to cover that a little bit later as well. But one way of, and Julie, you can tell me if I'm answering your question correctly. Let's assume that the session that we are sort of talking about, which was this one, is a lot larger, right? What I would do is I can do a couple of things. One thing I can do is give me a short summary of this, and then and basically I would ask it to give me a short summary, and then I would paste that summary in my second session to sort of review that. The second thing is that's one. The second way can also be you can ask it to create you a PDF. So you can ask it to give you like an artifact, and then that artifact is what you can share in other places. Again, you will run into token issues and all of those issues, yes. But you can do things like summarizing it shorter, creating it into a smaller PDFs, and that sort of a thing. That can actually like sort of help solve for that. I got another question. How do you handle large font? I think I answered that, but Julie, let me know if I didn't. Salim, you said a new session has no context. To both Salim and Dinoska, I think ChatGPT, there is a setting that you can turn off, if I'm not wrong, for it to not share information between your sessions. Having said that, if it is happening, you can just tell it. Like you can just say, like, this is a brand new session. Do not read any of the information from my other sessions, and then just review it based on this. So I think ChatGPT, you are right, has a sharing thing, but you can just tell it to not use it. Most of the time, they are able to like sort of do that. So maybe way to so yeah, let me know if Salim and Dinoskai answered your question. But yes, I think you have to sort of tell it like you can tell it to be like, oh, just focus on this and not like on the other of the stuff. Okay, Antoine, new to AI, which models are good to pay for and use? Honestly, Antoine, I don't have an answer to that. I do think the free versions of ChatGPT, Gemini, these guys are pretty good, but you will have to play around and sort of see what works in your use case. Which AI model you see in motivation and wrong data? I read that Grok is not more affordable but tokens with others. Thanks, Liz, for the question. Um, my personal experience is that depending on context, models sort of hallucinate differently. But for everyday usual tasks, I do find Gemini is pretty good. I think part of the reason why that is because Gemini internally, because it's a Google product, it has a lot of like internal information that it uses to sort of check and balance its response. But I would also say that I wouldn't rely on a model to be good or bad at hallucinations. The techniques that we are talking about inherently will help reduce that. So let's say if you are doing some work and let's say you have an output, doing a fresh eye review will actually help you catch a hallucination. Because when you paste your response into a new sort of a thing, it might catch things which are not true. So we are going to talk about techniques of catching hallucinations. It's hard to say which model sort of goes better than other, and after a point I feel like all the models are going to be same in some ways, but these techniques will sort of also help catch some of that. Let me know, Liz, if I answered your question. And also Salim and Dinoska, let me know if I answered the context question. Okay, amazing questions, folks. I'm hoping I'm able to answer. I do want to be able to answer as many as I can, but let me know if I'm unclear, and I'll try and explain it more. Okay, now, again, we are still in the concept of a review, right? So now we are going to look at the second technique. Now, the second technique is this concept is known as AI as a judge. Now, the way it sort of works is now this concept requires a little bit of an extra work, which is how I would sort of say. Let's say I'll give a demo and that will sort of make sense. Let's say I start a new session and I say, tell me about FIFA. Now, I'm just going to do it a little faster, but then you will see what I sort of mean. In the concept of AI as a judge, the first big thing that you do is you don't just generate one response, you generate multiple versions of the response. So you just don't rely on one thing, you just generate three different versions. Let's say, rather than this, let's say I want to ask for a promotion from my manager in who I work in, let's say Amazon, and let's say I say, give me three emails that I can potentially send. So when you are doing AI as a judge, and now you can do it directly one way or you can do it at the end of a session. The first step is, and this is a sort of a multi-step thing, it is to sort of create three different versions of your response or multiple versions of what you want. So in this case, it gave me the multiple options. It gave me this option, it gave me this another option, and then it gave me a third option. Now, in this technique, what you again also have to do is now you have to sort of think as a human with your own brain. What does what kind of an email do I want? What is like what does good look like for me? As I said here, let's say I have a criteria. So let's say my criteria is that my email should be formal, my email should use simple language, and my email should be direct. So let's say my criteria of evaluation, let me just write it down, is direct email, right? Simple language, and then formal. Let's say I define this is my criteria, that this is what good email looks like to me. And then I can ask my model, if I go above here, using the below criteria. Again, how you prompt it doesn't matter, they mostly get it. Review the three options above and show me review the three options above should be fine. Sometimes my English is confusing. Now, when I do this, when I'm basically asking the model, okay, basically you can like just like review the outputs, the multiple outputs that were generated using a criteria. Now, criteria is very important, folks. If you don't give it a criteria, it will sort of think of its own criteria, and then that may not be what you want. Now it's going to give me different ideas. So it will say, okay, option one, direct and data driven. Option two is more milestone. This is more alignment focused. So now it will sort of say that, okay, based on this, if your criteria is those three things, option one is your best starting point. You can also ask it to score. You can say, give me a score of each option based on the review criteria. Let's go here. Now, if I go to this, it's going to then try to give you a score, and then you can use that score to get a more relative sense of the which of the output is sort of like more aligned to you. So you can see that, oh, this one maybe is good at all, is maybe not as good as simple language. Maybe this is the one that's good at simple language and formality, but it's not as direct. And then you can also ask it to modify the options and to try to make them more aligned to what you want. Now, the reason why this is super, super cool, it's because A, you are asking a model to judge its own response, but you do have to give it a criteria to judge. The second part is one part of your review criteria can be that it should not have any hallucinations. Now, what that will do is when it's judging the outputs that you have given, it will then also try and apply the concept that, okay, there shouldn't be anything that's untrue in these statements. And then that also adds a layer of hallucination protection for you. So that's how this technique broadly works, folks. First thing is whatever you want in the end, create multiple versions of it. Then create almost like a rubric or a review criteria of how you are going to judge what is good, what is bad, and then make the LLM act as a judge for your outputs. I'm going to pause. And once again, folks, any questions you can ask on Zoom chat. I got a question from Liz. Which AI is best for finance? Grok most affordable for AI agentic tokens use or not? Once again, it's hard for me to answer for that, Liz, because I'm not a finance specialist and I don't want to say something that I'm not sure of. I will say though that I do think that sometimes you have to play around with different systems to see what's working best for you, because I don't know if there is a generic easy way to sort of score that. Now, if you do want a mathematical way of scoring it, there is, if people are curious about it, there is something known as LLM benchmarks, known as live bench. And here you can see like a benchmark of all the different models and which is good at what. So you can look at mathematics, data analytics, language. There's a lot of stuff here. Again, you can take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. I don't know how good the benchmarks are, and this obviously like it's easy to sometimes like make a model to sort of like uh, agree to a benchmark, but this is one way that Liz maybe that can help you answer your question as well. I shared it on Zoom chat. Is there a specific reason to take this order? Would swapping options and criteria order change the output anyway? I would say play around with that, Salim. That's a great idea. Maybe by swapping the options with different ways, it might change the output. You can stretch it as much as you want. I think the concept is what I want to focus on more, which is like having multiple options and then having a review criteria and sort of combining them together to score an option can sort of like give a better response. But what you are saying is totally true. You can also play around more to see like, is there a better way to unbias the judgment itself? Let me know if that makes sense. Um, I'm going to give it 15 more seconds. If any more questions. Okay, awesome. Now, this is sort of a mixture of the previous things that we have talked about. In this, and I'm just like, I don't think I need to necessarily demo, but this concept I do want to sort of mention is a simpler version. This is also a little more token friendly, where you ask AI to review its own thing and then give you back a response, and then obviously doing your own final review. Now, the first two techniques we talk about, they can tend to be a little bit more token heavy. This is more simpler, but this is something that I always ask at a bare minimum people should be doing, which is like once you have a response from AI, obviously you should be doing a human review, but also asking it to review itself and maybe giving it a criteria, then also can sort of give you that response. The difference between this technique, sorry, and the other technique is that in AI as a judge, you have multiple options and then you're more formal as a proper judge and scoring. But even something as simple as just asking it to give me a first version, critique it, revise it, and then sort of change the draft can also be a very organic way of doing the same thing. And this can potentially be a little bit easy on the tokens. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. It's just a simpler version of the first two techniques. Now, this is something that this is something that I really like doing, which is this concept of a devil's advocate. And the way devil's advocate sort of works is that it sort of pushes the LLM into sort of going to the exact opposite opinion and then sort of reading it from the other side of the lens. It's almost like you are trying to be in the shoes of a debater where you are in the pro side and then you are in the con side. The dumbest example for this would be, let's say I go to Gemini and let's say I say, uh, explain to me why building a new smartphone is a good idea. I'm just using like a random sort of an example. And then what these tools are going to typically do, they might flag sometimes that it's not the best idea or something, but then it will try to sort of give you like an opinionated take based on your own opinion that you have given. And it will try to sort of give you like sort of an output like that. I'm going to give it around 10 seconds, hopefully. It's going to start to hopefully give me a response soon. Uh, so it sort of like talks about this. So because if you can carve out a sliver of the market, this can happen. So it will give me a response that sort of connects to my own ideas. So it sort of said like building a smartphone is a good idea, but it's easier because the strategic leverage of owning the device people touch is great. Now, when I'm asking you to do a devil's advocate, I'm asking you to be the exact opposite opinion. So I'm going to say, okay, act as someone who does not believe in smartphones as a viable business model, then tell me why this is a bad idea. And what this is going to do is, again, how you prompt it doesn't really matter as long as you can convey what broadly you're trying to say. It's going to try to sort of be in the shoes of a persona or an idea that's the opposite of where you want to be. And then it can actually give you like the other side of viewpoint as well. Now, here you will see, now it will start to give me issues. The supply chain monopoly, Android tab, the distribution chokehold, the niche market graveyard. So you will start to get two different things. And the reason I put it in the review loop because of that is because you're sort of reviewing your own thought process, where you are sort of giving it an input, giving it an opinion it will take, and then you're asking that, okay, go to the exact opposite of it. Tell me from that perspective how this looks. And again, I keep reiterating this, human review is still very important. As a human, you still have to review what it is saying. But having both perspectives in front of you can sort of allow you to get a better holistic response around it. Okay. Uh, okay. Maybe Carla, maybe your internet might have some issues. Um, Again, those are the four techniques, folks. Fresh eyes, making LLM as a judge, just reviewing your own thing, and just going to the exact opposite opinion. Before I move on to the second technique, I'm going to pause here. Folks, any questions? You can ask me a Zoom chat. Okay, awesome. You can keep the uh, you can keep the conversation going. Okay, now the second sort of a workflow technique, and by the way, this is very useful in any kind of like deep work that you are sort of trying to do, which is the concept of structuring of your work. So remember, we were talking about sort of review criteria. Uh, in this case, now these techniques are a little different because in these techniques you are sort of trying to structure how your sort of large language model session is going. And sorry, I jumped ahead, but I wanted to make sure I explain that. In the previous one, you were reviewing the output. In this case, you are trying to structure the way it gives you an output. And now, to do that, we are going to look at like these three techniques. The first technique is a rubric first technique. Now, what that means is when you are giving large language model a generation task, tell it what does good look for you. By good, I mean what is a good quality response. I'll give you sort of an idea here. Let's go back here. Let's start a new session. Let's say I wanted to give me a summary of Canada's, let's say, football team performance in 2026 World Cup. Let's say I say this. Now, I'm going to tell it what does good look for me. So I'm going to write what qualities I expect from the report. And let's say from the summary, and let's say I say it should not have any hallucinations. So let's say that's one criteria. It should be simple to read. I don't even need to write. It should be simple to read. Let's say less than a page. And then let's add another one. Let's say uh, should use simple language. Uh, yeah, let's do that. Now, what is going to happen is, since you have already given it a thing of that, okay, this is what is actually good for me. This is what I like as a human. These are the criteria that I really like. What this is actually going to do is, it's going to like sort of try to create a summary, but it will also already do a review by itself. So it's going to look at, okay, it shouldn't have any hallucination, it should be simple to read, it should be less than a page. And again, it will do its best to catch any hallucinations. But what this essentially does is it adds a layer of check and balance over your output. Rather than just being a blank, give me a summary of Canada's football team performance. If you tell it what does good look like, then it can sort of follow those directions and then try to sort of give you a better output. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that if you are trying to do this technique, you do have to spend a bunch of time figuring out what does a good quality criteria look like for you, because that's where the human element comes into the picture. It might be something that you decide, it might be something that a group of people decide, but this is very important because once you have defined this, then you can sort of over time prompt your session into always sort of giving you the quality of response that you want. Again, it sometimes still drifts away. That's the problem with all large language models, but this does try to give it a little bit of a focus. It's also very useful if you are somebody who is coding by these LLMs, because when you are writing code, right? Let's say I wanted it to write, okay, write me a Python function to, and for folks who don't know programming, Python is a programming language to fetch data from a website. If I don't give it what good quality code looks like, so let's say good code quality criteria, it is just going to give me a bare code. But then if I give it a good criteria, I would say like it should be secure. Like, oh, we all want to write secure code that's not hacked. It should be performant. What it's going to do is it's going to try to then incorporate those criteria, and that can add a level of check and balance to your programming workflow. If you are somebody who is building an agent for other people, having that review criteria again will actually help your agent also give a better response. Again, we're not going to go into a code, which is not a coding session, but this is an example. So this approach is known as the rubric first approach. I'm going to pause once again. Any questions? But if you accidentally look in the chat, can you recover it? That's by Shreya. I don't think so. Unless you have memory or some sort of a thing in your system that you are using, I don't know. I mean, I haven't run into that, but maybe there is a way. I'm not sure. Maybe you can reach out to the whatever tool you are using, and maybe they can tell you. But I don't think there is an easy way for doing that. I'll wait for 10 more seconds. Is hallucination inherently relevant, or is it more of not giving all opportunities for inference within the prompt? I would say it's a mixture, James. Uh, you can sort of like you can sort of do some tricks like this or the other ones that we looked at to reduce the hallucinations, but to some extent they are a feature of the large language model, because at the end of the day the language model isn't an actual brain, right? It's actually just predicting the next word, and so if it accidentally predicted in the wrong context, then it sort of keeps building on that. That's why I wanted to focus on workflows today, because it's hard to just fix hallucinations from a prompt perspective because they're inherent nature of large language models. But what you can do is by using some of these and other techniques, you can catch those hallucinations using the model itself and then hopefully try to fix them. So you can reach an eventual state of reduced hallucinations. But it's very hard to do just with prompts. You do have to like do multiple rounds of human and AI review to make sure that those hallucinations aren't there. Let me know if I answered your question, James. I mean, I'm assuming I know what good looks like. It seems that often even that is a learning exercise with the model sense. 100% Salim, but my point would be that that is the sort of the discipline and that's sort of the work that the human part person needs to do of figuring out what good might look like. And that's where, if you have co-workers, people who might know better, those are again people that to actually lean on. I actually think that if this is done right, you can actually increase your human interaction, because then you know that the LLM will give you what you want, but then you can talk to five people and be like, oh, you tell me from your experience what does good look like, and then sort of incorporate that. So it depends on like how one sort of approaches that sort of a thing. Um, okay, I don't see any questions. Um, Now, now this is another technique of structuring the work. In this technique, it's again, I'm not going to do a demo of this because this is again a very simple technique where rather than when you are asking for the output, right? Rather than asking for the entire thing, ask for outline of it. What that sometimes does is it sort of gives you a broad structure of how something can look like, and then you can be the human who organizes that work. It's sort of like Lego. Like rather than asking it to build you the entire thing, you can ask it that, okay, give me an outline, give me the different pieces for what I want, whether it's a report, whether it's an email, whether it's code, and then you do the work of combining them together. And then if you need AI's help, you can get that help again. So it sort of depends on like how you want to combine it together. But this is a technique which I like because sometimes I want more control. So an example that I can quickly show you here is that if I go back to my chat here, when I was asking for it code, it did give me the entire code, but I could have just said, okay, give me parts of the code and then I'm going to figure out how to put it there. So giving an outline sometimes, especially in something that's very important, that helps you to review the work earlier, and then also you can choose whether you want to continue doing it with the large language model or whether you just want to come do it yourself. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I'm hoping that broadly the concept is making sense. Now, this is the one that I really like. This is something that's very useful if you are trying to like sort of even write code, building your own agent, or even doing something very, very complex. So let's say I'll go back here. Let's say I'll start a new chat. Let's say my job was to I need to create a research summary of, let's say, Honda cars usage in Canada. Let's take that as an example. Now, rather than asking the LLM to do everything for you, but other thing that you can do is you can ask it to be like, okay, before you write it, let's say, show me the series of steps that need to be undertaken to write this summary. Now, rather than actually giving the output, I'm telling the model, break it down into series of tasks. So let's see what sort of tasks it sort of gives me. Sometimes it ignores this as well. So you might have to figure out what prompts is actually working. But I'm going to give it maybe 45 seconds. It's outlining the key steps. Let's see. So it's sort of giving you an approach. So it's saying, okay, define the scopes, gather market statistics, analyze the model, uh, assess local economic impact, synthesize and draft. Now, what you can potentially do is, let's say you have these 5 different steps that you need to take. Now, before you do anything, what you can do is you can decide that, okay, this one step is something that will be done as a human. I'm not going to use AI for it. I'm going to talk to 5 people. I'm going to talk to my PhD professor. I'm going to talk to my manager. What do they actually need? So I'm going to maybe not use AI for that. So you define that for yourself. Okay, for this, I'm going to use this. Let's say you realize, okay, I need to gather market statistics. Maybe this will require I'm going to take something from official statistics myself, or I'm going to go to a different model. I know somebody was saying maybe Grok is good for financial models. So maybe I'm going to use Grok to do this. Maybe I'll use a different model for the analysis part, and maybe another different model for assessing the local impact. And then finally, I'll come back to Gemini and I'll paste all those different things, all those different artifacts, and then I'm going to combine them together. So what this does is, and this is just my term, it's not an official term, I call it task chaining. By breaking down a complex task into smaller pieces, you can pick and choose where you need what kind of an AI support, where you want AI to do everything, where you want where you want AI side, where you want the human to do something. Now, uh, again, this does assume that you already understand these 5 steps. You maybe don't, and then again, that's something that you will have to learn. But the reason why this is important is, if nothing else, it also tells you how, if I would have just told Gemini to do this report, how it would have gone about doing it, because it now gives it a plan. So it's helpful even if you don't intend to if you just intend to make Gemini do it, because breaking it into tasks also help the model itself to do this in a more structured way rather than just doing it in one shot. And this is no different from how as humans, when you are trying to do something hard, breaking it down into smaller steps is useful for us. Same thing here. This is useful for the model itself, but you can do more. You can choose the pieces that you want to control. You can choose the pieces that you want the model to take care of. And this kind of task chaining is very useful if you are building an AI agent, if you are writing code, because then you can see where you want to use which agent. It might be that for preserving tokens, for the final step, you're going to use the cheapest model. And maybe you realize that you need to use the more smarter model for this step. So this can also help you optimize how you use your tokens. So I call it task chaining, you can call it whatever. But the idea is that like you're sort of breaking down your task into smaller pieces and then deciding maybe I need a smaller model for this, different human for this, and then sort of combining them together. Now, before I go into the next one, I'm going to pause again. We covered three things. First is telling model what good looks like before it generates a response. Second, asking it to give an outline, and then you are figuring out if that outline actually makes sense, and then sort of breaking down your task into smaller pieces with the model itself. Before I go into the next one, I'm going to pause. Any questions, folks? I'm going to wait for 15, 30 more seconds. And again, folks, no question is a bad question. It's just there are different workflows. People may not have tried it, so I wanted to get a sense. Do you think it's possible to use LLMs for financial data and complex recurring workflows? I have a workflow that takes me 6 hours to complete. Is it possible to have an LLM complete that task? So, this is a great example of, uh, first of all, yes, I do think that's possible, James. But this is where I would employ something like task chaining. What I would do is, the first thing I would do is, let's assume that you are doing financial data transformation. Let's assume what you are doing is, actually, I'm not a finance person, so I can't come up with an example, but let's say you are converting data that's coming from 5 different countries and normalizing them into, let's say, one single currency and all of that. Let's say we are doing something like that. What I would do is I would maybe prompt an LLM to be like, okay, this is what I do. Break it down into tasks that an AI can do for me to speed that up. And then you would then have to set up the infrastructure for all of those tasks. It is going to take a little bit of time. You do need like a little bit of maybe programming help. It depends on how complex your task is. But it is totally possible to do that. I would argue that's one of the best use cases for task chaining where you take that job, describe it to your LLM, and ask it to break it down into a series of steps that a language model can do or an AI can do, and then see if those steps make sense, and then start to like automate it one step at a time. So let's say in your pipeline you have fetching data, cleaning data, transforming data, presenting data, a very typical pipeline. So first maybe automate just a bit fetching data. And then that is the one thing that the AI does. You set up an agent for doing that, then for each of the separate steps, you automate it one step at a time. So task chaining is something that I would use for something for creating a workflow like that. Let me know, James, if I answered your question. Okay, awesome. I'll give it 15 more seconds for any more questions. Okay, so now this technique, again, we have sort of talked about it briefly before, but I do want to like sort of bring it one more level. I call it the broad category of multiple perspectives. Here, the idea is that sometimes when you are talking to a generative AI model, you are asking for its perspective. You might be asking that, oh, obviously this is dumb, but who has a higher probability of winning the match between England and Norway? So you are supposedly looking for a perspective from a large language model, as sometimes we do. These techniques are there to add rigor to that perspective. Everything that we have done till now will also help with that, but these techniques are more geared towards when you are doing that sort of a session. So, the first thing, and I think my bias I have already said about it, uh, this technique is sort of known as best of three. Uh, in this technique, I typically am like, oh, for whatever I wanted to do, give me like three different versions of the same thing. And then I do sort of a human review of it, but then I can also use my earlier LLM as a judge technique. But the reason why I wanted to call this one out specifically is because just asking the model to generate multiple responses does help you to sort of see the same thing from multiple perspectives. And then that can help you to sort of automatically improve the quality of your response. If you use ChatGPT, you might see it already does that sometimes. Sometimes you know how it shows like two responses and then it asks you to choose one. That's an internal way of sort of like checking for them, like, okay, if I have to generate multiple responses, what is better, what is not. And so best of three is just a multiple perspective thing. You can make it best of n. You can say like, oh, give me like let's say for example, if I go to Gemini, let's create a new session and I say, okay, today is England v Norway in World Cup. Tell me from five different perspectives who will win. Let's make it happen. Let's give it a second. And then it will start to give you multiple perspectives that can sort of give you like a layer of extra check that you are not just listening to it from just like one lens, you are sort of listening to it from multiple lenses. Again, human human review is still important, but just having those multiple things can actually be useful in trying to assess the quality of all of them separately. I'm just going to give it 10 seconds to just show you folks how this can sort of look. So it's going to look at it from one perspective, squad depth, tacticalness, psychological perspective, midfield control. So again, I'm not a football like fans. I have no idea which is better, which is not, but I'm sort of just going like, it will sort of give you like different perspectives. Again, it's on you folks to figure out which perspective you like, and then you can tell it that, oh, maybe talk to me more about this, and then it can do that. But best of three is just like a disciplined way to sort of do that. Yeah, James, fair. This is sort of a, yeah, that's what polymarket tries to do at a human level. Okay. So best of three, not going to spend too much time, but I hope that the concept is clear. It's just sort of having that extra layer of discipline. Now, this is also something I hinted on before, which is this concept of role assignment. Now, you already sort of know that maybe a lot of people know that sometimes you can give a role to an AI, right? So you can go and be like, okay, let's say let's say you want to write a LinkedIn post. So you can say like, you are an experienced marketing professional, write a LinkedIn post for selling soap. So again, just giving this role to AI really helps. And it's more of a prompt engineering technique, but the reason I want to talk about it here is now you can also use this technique to sort of critique your output. So now you can say you are somebody, and let's say, and I'm just gonna like use a dumb example. You are someone who hates soaps. Okay, you never wanna use soaps. You always wanna use body wash or whatever. So let's say you tell it now, okay, you are someone who hates soaps. Now critique this LinkedIn post. Now, what this will do is, again, this is sort of like what we did earlier, which is like hearing the opposite opinion, but more specifically, this is about in an opinionated space. So now it will give you like sort of like a critique of what you just said. So again, it's sort of like trying to find trying to find an opposing role that for your output that what that can look like, and then sort of trying to for that opposing role to break the response of the large language model. Now, the reason why I always call this technique out, and this is more so for programmers more than for coding side of things more than anything else. If you're somebody who is writing code and you're building systems with this, it helps to sometimes assign an opposing role of a penetration tester or a cybersecurity specialist for them to try to break the code that AI has generated. So this is a very powerful technique because what this can do is, let's say I'm telling it to, oh, right, give me an application for betting because we're talking about Polymarket. Whoever coded it created the website. You can prompt Claude or whatever you are using to be like, oh, you are now a penetration tester, you are now a stress tester. Test this website and try to break it and tell me what are its problems. And then it can start to give you a perspective of how that something can break. So role prompting can be very powerful, especially let's say if you're using like if you're using large language model, which ideally you shouldn't, but let's say for doing some medical self-diagnosis, giving it a role of somebody who would be a critique of that can help you not like go down the rabbit hole and can sort of give you like that sort of a balance there. So I do want to call it out specifically. It's not so different from some of the other techniques, but this can help you critique your output really well. Now, I'm gonna pause. Any questions, folks, till this point? Okay, awesome. Now, now this is a very interesting technique. There's actually a very interesting YouTube video if people want to watch it, which is related to this. Which is what they did was they had seven different or five different AIs, sort of sort of very. Oh, actually, I have a question. Assigning role, is this still relevant for the newer LLMs? Absolutely. I have seen it even now in some of the most powerful models. Um, you giving it a role is not just that it gives you a better response, it gives it a way to review its own work. So let's say if I go to a Claude right now, which I use in my job, and I ask it to write code, versus I tell it you are a technical architect, now write this code, there is a substantial difference in that. Role gives it a purpose. It is still important, but it's not just for doing the task, it can also be used for sort of reviewing that. But back to perspective panel. Now, this is very, very interesting. Let's say, so there's a YouTube video that talked about that what they did was they took seven different AIs, I think, and they made those AIs debate with each other. The AIs formed a panel, debated on the topic of, I think they did capitalism versus socialism versus communism, if I'm not wrong, something like that. So that concept, I tend to call it perspective panel, which is basically, let's say you are deciding let's start a new chat. I am deciding which laptop to buy. Now, what you can tell it is create a panel of five different personas, and then you can say, okay, person one hates Mac. This person two who loves Windows. I'm just using a random example, or I guess not Windows but Microsoft. Person three hates technology. I'm just using a dumb example. Let's say, and I'm just going to use three because it's going to take a long time otherwise. And then I'm going to say, okay, run a live debate panel and then tell me the conclusions. And let's say run a live debate panel with 3 rounds. Let's do this. Now, again, this is a very token heavy exercise. You do need a lot of tokens to be there. What this is going to sort of start to do with it is start to sort of try to like create like a panel of different people who are sort of talking to each other. So let's say in round one, you get like this sort of a thing. I loved how it called it a Luddite. I don't think that's accurate, but we'll go to that separately. The second one did this, then the third round of this, and then you sort of start to like get like a conclusions there. Now, I'm using it for a dumb example, but the reason why this is interesting is what this creating a debate style, multiple perspective sort of a panel can sometimes give you insights and ideas. And again, I ran it in a very dumb way. That can sort of give you more perspectives on about something that you are interested in. So when you read this, you might get some ideas of who you agree with more. Yeah, I agree, James. That's why I said Luddite is the wrong statement here. Yeah, so it's stupid and it shows the bias, but yeah. But again, what it actually does that is it actually starts to sort of create like a panel of different individuals, and then all of those different individuals sort of work together to start to give you like multiple perspectives on a topic. So it sort of can become like a live debate. Now, it might seem like it is a very like sort of a thing that you may not need. But what I find is that again, if you are building AI agents, having multiple AI agents debate on something important and then getting an output can reduce hallucinations, can give you a better outcome. But also, when you are sort of doing something and you are doing a debate with, let's say, you are talking to Gemini about whether or not you should join our meetups, having a panel who can give you like different opinions about why you should join these curious skill meetups and why you shouldn't can give you a deeper perspective of why that might be important for you. So I'm just sort of doing a bad example here, but essentially it can give you insights. Again, the human review is still very important, but it can give you like some good perspectives on a topic and then sort of see a live debate happen between all of them. This is token heavy though. Like I did a very dumb version, but this you do require a little bit of more time to sort of do this. Uh, okay, I'm gonna pause. Any questions? And the other suggested a Chromebook to the person who extend. Yeah, yeah. Again, I prompted it in a very dumb way. I should have said like they're smart debaters. But yeah. But I'm gonna pause, folks. Any questions on like the multiple perspective side of things? Again, my idea here is that you guys get a gist of it. You don't need to follow my prompts or whatever. I think having that mental model is more important. That pushing your LLM for multiple perspectives is the key part here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Folks, great job. We are left with two more techniques. Now, these two techniques are in a lot of professional setting, in my opinion, very important because they do help, and this directly tackles the hallucination aspect that people were talking about. To some extent, they will help sort of reduce the hallucinations. Now, these two techniques, I sort of call them staying grounded, mostly because I couldn't figure out how to categorize them together, but you will see what they do, and hopefully that will make sense. The first technique is this concept of verifying the claims. Now, this is very important for you to catch hallucinations. Let's say I go to here, I click on new chat, I say, give me a report on Hyundai cars problems in Canada. Let's say I do this. Now, Gemini is going to do its thing and it's going to start to give me some sort of a report based on what information it's able to gather, and then it sort of gives me all of this different information. I was not aware there is a class action, but that's a separate thing. Now, uh, I'm going to copy this prompt for a second, but it doesn't really matter. Now, once I do have an output, now you can do it in the beginning of a session and in the end of the session. Basically, ask it, list the specified facts and claims and numbers in your response above and mark the confidence on each. So what this does is it sort of does a basic fact checking on the response of AI. Now, I will say you are asking AI to fact check itself. It might still hallucinate because that's just the nature of it, but it might help you catch something because this is a very small output, but let's say your output is huge. Asking it to listing the specific facts and claims, what that is going to do is it will give you an opportunity to go through those facts and claims and then like actually sort of look at it and be like, oh, is this actually true? Is this actually false? You don't actually have to care about the confidence that it gives you, but you can like see the certain facts and then you can be like, oh, I'm going to go to this link and I'm going to see if this is actually true. Now, one thing you will notice is like, for example, in this case, it has given high confidence for everything. I would still, as a human reviewer, verify this. And I find this useful when it's a huge report. Let's say it's like a 3,000 or a 300-page report. I can start with like, give me the top 10 facts in this report that you have generated. And then I'm going to like maybe do a manual review, ask it to check it. And that just makes a discipline of like, if you are relying on your LLM to give you like a fact based answer, this additional step can help you as a human identify any issues in that. Uh, I'm going to pause on this one because I know this did cause confusions to some people last time, so I'm going to wait. Any questions on this? Question without using any of the judge during inference. When latency is available. How do you evaluate AI response quality in production without using LLM as a judge during inference? So a couple of ways of doing that. I think when you are building an AI agent, the first reality of the situation is that you will have to accept a certain level of risk that some of the responses may not be the best quality because that does happen with these models. Unless you fine tune a model for yourself and you hyper test it, as long as you're relying on these third party systems, no matter who built the model, you will run into issues. Now, there are three different ways that you can evaluate AI response. The first way is automated, that you do need an LLM as a judge. You do need an AI model or something that's verifying the response that your initial AI model has given. So that is your automated pipeline. The other two ways that we use in the company where I work is, first way is we do spot checks because we do have observability on human interactions. We do spot checks by after removing all the confidential information. of interactions that people had with the model that I deployed. And then we run them through other AI and human review loops just to find, are we randomly finding patterns where it's hallucinating. So we do have that human loop. It doesn't happen at real time, but we do it at a random sample. So let's say if there are 1,000 requests a day, we pick up like 30 and we make them go through human reviewers just to see like if that makes sense. And the third one is getting human feedback. You can sometimes get indirect feedback. Let's say somebody was using a system that you built and they wrote that, oh, this information is wrong. So you can catch that. But also, you can ask people to sort of rate interactions. And sometimes you can get inputs of like, oh, this was a very bad interaction. AI hallucinated a lot. But for real time, you do have to deploy some sort of an automation mechanism, and it's not going to be perfect. But these additional layers can sometimes help you to catch future hallucinations and things. Let me know, Srira, if I sort of gave you some ideas on this. The model prompt self-correction rule. When using human feedback, yes, we do. Currently, we do. Sometimes it's not able to, but then we just flag it to our internal human reviews, and then they eventually help build up the model. But yes, we do try to like incorporate the feedback into it. But like in my space, we don't actually fine tune our model. But if you are somebody who's fine tuning the model, that feedback then can also go back into a fine tuning loop to make the model better. Can you test the output against a separate source? For deterministic use cases like the accounting of can you test the output like, oh, absolutely. So let's say I go back here and I'm just going to use this as an example. I can say, can you fact check these from, let's say, StatCan as a source? It won't really work properly, but I'm just giving you an example. Now I'm giving Statistics Canada as a source against which it is fact checking the output. But here you can go wild. You can have your own PDFs. You can have your own knowledge grounding sources that you can give it to the model and it can fact check it against that. Now in this case it won't work because StatCan doesn't have it, but like I'm assuming that the example makes sense. Let me know, James A, if I answered your question. Can you trust LLM self-assessment when verifying? I think in general, as a rule of thumb, I only trust LLMs 40% in general. Like I don't trust, I'll never trust them 100% is maybe I say it. I start at 40 and then I get better at it. I do think that this LLM self-assessment is pretty good, but it's not going to be 100% good. So I don't think it's about absolute trust because, as Yoda said, there is nothing absolute. So you have to see relative trust. I do relatively trust it, but I am going to do like a manual review of it to make sure that it's not missing things. But I have seen that LLMs are able to, they have better mechanisms in place to do a better self-assessment and to give like a holistic picture of what might be off. Let me know, James, if that makes sense. We have to use a For sure. I also think that to your point, Liz, I 100% agree. I think that skills and human experience are important, but that's part of the reason. And I'm not just saying it because I'm taking the session, but it's also coming from my own experience. Workflows are what make LLMs better rather than prompts. So having that extra layer of an AI reviewing output and a human layer will always be needed. I don't think you will ever get into a space where you just completely trust the first response that AI gives. Even the most powerful models should have a check and balance with another model to double check it if you want an automated thing. But I do agree. I think that the human skills are still needed. I will say though, it's a different set of human skills. I don't know who was saying this, but somebody was saying this that I need to know what good looks like. So that's also now something that I am a solutions architect, technical person, right? So I can see bad code. I use AI for coding. But let's say if you're a junior developer, you will first have to learn what does good look like. So there's more work that almost needs to be done. I use AI as a super good intern. Oh, 100%. I saw a friend of mine framed it this way that AI is a super good teenager intern where like it tends to sometimes go on tangents and you have to like guide it back. Wonder if adding threat of severe consequences might improve the trust verifying. It does. I have seen it work again because it then starts to double check it. There is even a concept regarding, I think it's called emotional prompting. Uh, where was it? Yeah, it's actually called emotion prompting, if I'm not wrong. I seem to have seen it somewhere. Let's see. Yeah, there's a paper on it essentially, and understand emotion. So they can get better with emotional stimuli. So if that's something that you're interested in, I'm going to send a link of it on Zoom chat. It is something that can happen. Your prompt is to how to create deterministic prompt. LLMs are not deterministic. Your prompts need to be deterministic. How to create determinism. I think again, it really is hard to answer that. It depends on context. I think there are things that you can do if you are building an agent because you have access directly to the model, where you can even do some manual configurations on the model so that it becomes less deterministic. There is a concept of, I can sort of show you guys. It's called LLM temperature, which sort of controls the randomness of the responses. So that can also, I'll share it on Zoom chat. If you are using it in a programming way, that can help you reduce the randomness. Having said that, again, like my usual approach is that is it solving the problem even if it's not writing the same thing over and over? Like let's say you are asking it, what should I eat for dinner? As long as it's giving you options broadly that are in the similar categories, what I aim for, I never look at it like it should exactly will be giving you the same response. But again, it really depends on the context. But if people are curious, LLM temperature is an interesting like thing to sort of read about when it comes to like determinism in large language models. I'm gonna wait for 10-15 more seconds if more questions. Okay, awesome. Now, this is I just put it in stay grounded. But I do want to sort of just quickly talk about this that I know that people have been talking to me about like have asked questions about token usage. Now, I will say this that I don't know if this will be the most totally efficient way, but this is also an important workflow that I do sometimes think about that in broadly all the different providers that we have right now, they have one pattern. By providers, I mean ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini. I think they have a model that's good for small things. So Claude has Haiku. I think ChatGPT has used to have a mini model. I think Gemini also has something. If I'm not wrong, if I go here, I've not actually tried it, but Gemini also have like a Flash model. So all of these systems have a Flash model. So if you have an everyday thing that you are not superly like worried about, let's say you wanna ask the recipe of how to cook chicken or butter chicken or something, or you want to ask a very simple question, then trying to default to the simplest model because the fastest model is often better. It is token conservative, but also it's less stressful for the mind to read because these LLMs give like huge responses. So using the smallest, fastest model is what to use. Now, you might ask me, how do I find out about the different models? Now, this is one thing that I would say is the human part that is needed. All that providers have some sort of a website where you can read what their models are supposed to do. Like for example, if you go to OpenAI, you will find something known as model cards. And if you go here, you can easily sort of read, right? Okay, which model is sort of like what should I be using for what? What is a specialized model? And so like you can sort of learn like you can sort of learn about like which model is the fastest and the cleanest, simplest one. So my general advice is for simple everyday things, use the fastest, smallest model. Now then choosing when you have to do thinking, uh, that's when you use a reasoning or a higher model because when you want the model to think more, sometimes you can ping pong. You can ask it to think more, but once it has given you a summary, then you can go back to the cheapest model to do something or the other way around. So you can also ping pong between the two. Uh, Almost all the tools will allow you to sort of choose the model, but obviously, if the model answer doesn't look good, try a higher model, but also try other techniques. Like Let's say you are using the fastest and the cheapest model. I would say before you even like sort of go to the next higher model, look at, let's say, I'm just using my own techniques, but look at techniques and workflows that you can do to make the response better. If they don't work, sort of then change your model. So this is just a general advice to sort of like help you identify which model to use. I do say when you are starting a new task, it's important to think about how much thinking do you care about, or do you just care about a generic fastest response. I do see a number of things for accounting and finance and related prompts that can run a manual development family, and those prompts are agnostic. We have to identify everywhere. No, there's no certain, no, yeah, that's awesome, James. A. I love it. That's exactly the point. Like, if you are able to break your task into smaller tasks and chain them together and then automate each of them, that's actually pretty cool. Maintenance when free form output is avoidable, make it classify into a defined set of options in the prompt and have it format system practice schema. For sure, I think Sriram, what you're talking about is more relevant for like programming people who are using the model directly via code. I do agree that is the technique that we also use in that. But for users who are everyday users, sometimes this may or may not work. But that's a very great, good technique, especially when you are like more of a developer and you're doing it from that perspective. Okay, so just to recap, we looked at 12 different things. We looked at fresh eyes. We looked at giving it a new session and making it look at the output. We looked at AI as a judge. AI is sort of judging many different options. Uh, One second. Wait, I guess you guys are not able to see my. Hold on. Sorry, guys, my screen froze. Yes. Okay. So uh, AI as a judge, just sort of looking at like what are the different, just evaluating your different outputs, critiquing your output, being a devil's advocate, looking at it from the other perspective, giving it a rubric of what good looks like, giving it an outline, and then using that outline to maybe draft it yourself, breaking down your task into smaller pieces, doing a best of three. Don't give me one output, give me multiple. Assign it a role, create a perspective panel, making them debate with each other, verifying the claims, and then finding the right model. Now, I will share the presentation, folks, with you guys, and also the recording. These techniques are just like how I sort of frame them in my mind. But the idea again is that when you are trying to get a better output from the model, I think moving on from just prompts, having a set of more of a workflow techniques can help you sort of get a better response. Uh, I am going to pause here, folks. Any questions till now, or are there any other techniques that people have used? I know that Sriram shared one that's more for programming, but any questions or any other kind of techniques that people have used, we can address them. So, Shriram, I have a few ways. I do read the benchmarks, I do read the model cards, but I also try and do the task in different models and then see which is making more sense. I oftentimes define the rubric. So, I do a lot of this rubric first. So, I first define what is good for me. I do define that, like for my output, this is what looks good. And then I take a very engineering approach. I test different models and then sort of build like an intuition based on that. Uh, I don't by default go to the state of the art model. Like I actually have been surprised. Like for example, I know Claude's the recent Opus model is probably the most powerful one, but I found for my coding tasks, Sonnet was good enough. I didn't need the higher model, so I just end up using that. So it's more of like a experimentation of sorts. Is spec suit suitable in rubric technique? It is because, and for folks who don't know, we also did a session on this known as spec driven development. But that's a very cool connection, Roman. A spec is a rubric for the model. So a lot of models, when you give it a spec, folks, is the specification. Let's say if I'm asking a model to create a website, I give it a very detailed specification of what I want. The model does use that spec as a rubric to sometimes check whether its output is actually good or not. So it is 100% useful, especially when you're building applications. Oh, thanks, Liz, for attending. Thanks. Lovely to have you here. But folks, any other questions? Yeah, today's model is sufficient for most applications. I think physics, biology, benefits, today model are more than sufficient for most things. Yeah, for sure. I feel like for a lot of everyday things, you can like use these models for a lot of, for improving your workflows for a lot of everyday things. Like for me, for example, I use the model for creating the curriculum that we are going to cover, and that would have probably taken me a few weeks, but it does help me to have this. Obviously, like you are right with physics and math and stuff, like it will also benefit there. But for today's models are more than efficient for a lot of everyday things, 100%. Okay, awesome. I do see that people are going to leave soon, so I do want to share two things, folks. If folks like the presentations, please do join us on Meetup. That is where we are actually going to put up all the slides and the recordings. So it's on the Meetup group. Typically, if you go down, you will see that you will see it here as discussions. So this is where we're going to be posting our slides and everything. So please join us. We will have another session next week. And if people want to follow us on LinkedIn, this is where we are. So you can join us there. You can anytime follow us there. We do give a lot of updates there. Uh, but folks, if there are no more questions, thanks for joining. This has been super, super entertaining and I loved hearing other people's perspective. We'll have more sessions. Please do join us. But if there isn't anything else, folks, have a good rest of your day. And folks, if you can, leave us a review on Meetup. We would love to like know what we did well, what we could have done better. So please leave us a review as well. Okay, awesome, folks. This was awesome. Thank you so much for being there and engaging today. Have a good rest of your weekend.